Good? Okay. Welcome, everyone, on this Sunday afternoon in Montreal, Tijage. Thank you for being here for our Metonymy Press Summer Solstice Showcase. We had hoped to be filming in front of a bigger audience. We have a tiny audience. It's so nice to be sharing outdoor space with people. This is a co-presentation with Blue Metropolis, so thank you to them for their support on making this event happen. It's part of a series of events called their Next program. You can check out other events on their website. And so before I introduce our presenters this afternoon, I just want to acknowledge that we are broadcasting today from Tijage, located on the territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka. Tijage has been and continues to be a meeting place for other Indigenous peoples as well. We also recognize, of course, the limitations of such territorial acknowledgements, and so we therefore strive to actively support struggles for decolonization and Indigenous resistance locally and beyond. We encourage settler audience members to seek out opportunities for self-education and solidarity, including recent renewed calls to cancel Canada Day and hold the many parties accountable in light of the devastating and horrific news out of Kamloops, BC. We're really excited to be very slowly beginning to imagine what it might look like to host more events like this and bigger than this. I believe that we are hearing from Eli first, right? Okay, so Tarak Al-Bashilani-Lynch is a queer Arab poet living in Tijage, unceded Kanien'kehá:ka territory. Their work has appeared in the Best Canadian Poetry 2018 anthology, Guts, Carte Blanche, The Shade Journal, The New Quarterly, Arc Poetry Magazine, and elsewhere. They were longlisted for the CBC Poetry Prize in 2019. You can find them on Instagram and Twitter at The Only Eli Tarak. Their first book, Not Body, was published by Metonymy Press in September of last year, and their second poetry collection, The Good Arabs, is, we're very proud to say, forthcoming from Metonymy Press in September. Following Eli, we're going to hear from Helen. Helen Chau Bradley is a writer and a musician living in Tijage, Montreal. They're the author of Automatic Object Lessons, which came out with House Press in 2020. Their debut short story collection, Personal Attention Roleplay, is forthcoming from Metonymy in October of this year. After Helen, we're going to hear from Kamala Mackerel, a Montreal-based Mauritian-Canadian multidisciplinary artist, educator, writer, community arts facilitator, and literary translator who works with and across performance, photography, installations, textiles, digital, art, and literature. Zamfam, their debut poetry collection published by Metonymy Press. Sorry, I was promised no construction next door, but we'll look into it. Was named a CBC Best Poetry Book, a Globe and Mail Best Debut, and was longlisted for the Gerald Lampert Memorial Award and shortlisted for the QWF Concordia University First Book Award. Thank you for being here, Kama. And finally, because of many things, including borders and COVID, we do not have Cal with us, but we're going to, following the live broadcast, switch to a recording by Callum Angus, who is a trans writer and editor currently based in Portland, as I said. His work has appeared in Nat Brute, West Branch, LA Review of Books, Catapult, The Common, Seventh Wave Magazine, and elsewhere. He's received support from Lambda Literary and Signal Fire Foundation for the Arts, and he holds an MFA from the University of Massachusetts. I can never say that word, Amherst. Oliver's laughing at me. He is the founding editor of a very awesome journal called Smoke and Mold, which Eli is also involved with. His debut short story collection, A Natural History of Transition, was released by Metonymy Press in April of this year. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And welcome, Eli.
Hi, everyone. My brain is currently thinking like input, output, folder, move, this, that. So I'm going to try to get back into a poetry zone. Thanks thanks for the intro, Ashley. And it's exciting to be outside with people, with a single audience member. So that's really exciting. I'm just going to wait for a second while the construction... maybe it's gone. Okay. So I'm just going to start with... all of the poems that I'll be reading are from The Good Arabs, which is coming out with Metonymy Press very soon. And so if you want to get any of our books, you should buy them. They're all really great. So I'm going to start with It Can Never Be That Easy. Once while crawling through the back alleys of Park X, I heard cats rev up like cars, ready to pounce, but once while walking through the back alleys of Park X, I saw a man touch the back of his child's head with the most tender of touches, pushing the child forward as they walked sleepily home, and someone yelled at them to say, "The golden hour shone and turned the world magical. The protests didn't stop, and the deaths didn't stop, and the abuse didn't stop, but that hour of the day continued to show up, and the light brightened everything we touched. It could never be that easy, could it? You see, this isn't the first time violence has been conflated with beauty. A slap looks gentle in the raising of an arm, almost like praise, until it picks up speed, the wind pushed forward by her wide palm, and the red mark on your light cheek mirrors the sky." All right, this is another Park X poem. Most of the poems in the book take place in Park X or Zela in Lebanon, so it's very place-oriented. So this one's called The Tradition. Outside near the dépanneur on Ogilvy and Hutchison, or close by on Kerb and Saint-Roch, we walk slowly, head bowed down, out of bed before we make it to the bend in the road. This feeling of, will they fall out, won't they fall out, like apples at the end of the season, rotten inside, filled with bees, a thud as they hit the ground. Or maybe they aren't falling. Well, if this was happening in Park X, there would also be construction, so feels apt. Where was I? Or maybe they aren't falling, a wrap around the chest. What are they if they're not actually there? No apples, no other fruit, the fall a tender season before the challenge of incoming winter. If not, then what of this feeling of remembering, the absence pretending it is not absence, but something like the way we cheese at our mom, show brushed teeth, scream, "Finished!" head off to bed a minute early. Or maybe the way a tree is only a tree if it is filled with lilacs sometime in early June, the sound of you typing from the kitchen. The only way to remember you're still around. But if not, something deeper, a chant we recite that sounds like it belongs to church, but it doesn't. A hymn deep in the tongue, rarely spoken by your mother anymore, if only to transition centuries upon centuries of tradition into now. Leaked down the family trees, a sap, perhaps this time a cedar or the apple tree on the end of your street, when you finally get home, lay on the couch with your head propped up and wonder, how did I ever make it back here alive? All right, so the next poems are part of a series called Conversations with Arabs. And I picked a few conversations to read out today. So this one's called Conversation Number 2 with a Foreigner. Have you ever seen garbage piled up so high you cannot see the front entrance of an apartment building? I've only seen garbage in dumps going on for kilometers. Do you think that is a better way? I don't like to see it. I don't like to smell it. Is ignorance bliss? We have newer incinerators, newer technologies. They are keeping us safe. Who are they? They do not speak. But you are right. The incinerators we have are old. We do not have a comprehensive solid waste management strategy. What do these words mean? I don't know. Then why do you say them to me? I just parody the headlines of news articles. It is unsafe. I thought you didn't like to see it. I choose what I like to see. There again is the choice. Conversation number 6. What is Phoenicia? It is us. But what is us? I don't know. Are we Arabs? I was told not. By who? Are we Arabs? I was told not. By who? I don't know. Where does your family come from? They don't know. Neither do mine. But they say Phoenicia long ago. When is that? I do not know. Does she still live on this Phoenicia? Why is she a woman? Aren't all land masses women? That's transphobic. You're right. I wrote an essay about it. Enough about that now. What is a body called when it's suffering? What is the rubble when it's left behind? What? What? Are we not talking about Arabs? Are Arabs not rubble? Are Arabs not suffering? Are Arabs not joy? Are Arabs not singing? Are Arabs not extremists? Are Arabs not dangerous? Are Arabs not diverse? Are Arabs not religious? The buildings are growing higher and higher. The buildings cost too much. What buildings? The ones lost in the war. The war was so long ago. There are many people alive to remember it. But can't we forget? But shouldn't we remember? Conversation number 7. Someone should do something about this. What is this? All of this. You gesture, but there's so much it could be. I mean, everything. But who is someone, you ask? I'm not sure. And why not you? It can't be me. Why not? I'm so far away. Then why don't you get a little closer? I do not want to lose my comforts. What? Isn't it always that? Conversation number 9. I'm sick of hearing white people talk about bombs. Now you've caught my attention. And trivializing our lives, the lives of our families. Yes, now we've got something in common. Keep speaking. The Arab world is more than war. We have our food. No, that isn't it. No, that isn't it either. You know how much they love hummus. I saw a chocolate hummus in the grocery store the other day. No. An Israeli falafel on the corner of my street. Falafel isn't Israeli. You should tell them that. I will. Will you come with me? No. How come? I accidentally bought some from there yesterday. What do you mean, accidentally? Well, it's Arab-owned. I thought Israelis owned it. They do. They're Palestinians, but also Israeli. Oh, yeah. Well, that's complicated, isn't it? All right. That's that for the conversations. Also, free Palestine and fuck Israel. Just to be clear, when I say it's complicated, obviously it's more about the more nuanced issues regarding Palestinians. Anyways, so this one is called 31 Lines for You. Fixate on your words when it is raining and there's nowhere to go. The top of your head, seen from above, the birds fly and one shits on you. When I looked up, I didn't see you sitting down below. The sun shines, and yet we no longer feel alive. We move from one year to the next as though time is... You ask if it is Kulthum singing, and I say, it is not. We eat Vietnamese donuts on the floor while you pick at the dust on your carpet. Smoke fills the air, and we are told to keep our masks on. I don't want to choke what blooms so steadily with such a firm grasp. We looked at each other only once before we knew. When the wedding bells rang, we didn't know who was in the church. You only blush when I ask you to talk dirty to me. Fire licks the buildings and it almost looks alive. Its tongue a wet dragon, a serpent's hiss. We can't fake it till we make it because it shows all over our faces. So bored, you decide to wash the dishes. When I held my breath, you said it wasn't worth trying to hide. The garbage would still linger. Maybe we missed each other on purpose. Your intention is good, but sadly, you have brought nothing new. We forget to celebrate my birth, and nothing changes the next morning. It isn't like others haven't loved like this before, but there's something new in that look you give. We walk around and almost forget where we are. Hold on with a loose grip. Nothing more beautiful than a plane in the air before it crashes. It is days like these can't stop from falling asleep, gray blue skies overhead. Some people say bathroom and other people say washroom. Early sunshine, register the hum of your body underneath mine. You say, no matter how many times we wake up side by side, it's still a sweet and slightly exciting thing, right? You said your lungs were just so filled with fresh air out there in the woods. She slapped me with her plastic sandal and it didn't leave a mark. The pieces of building you touch are centuries old. The needle touches the recorder, but no sound emerges. Okay, I just have one more left. It's kind of nice to be doing a reading where you can see my body because I'm like literally always just like reading like this. And I find it kind of fun. And then when I'm sitting in a chair, I'm like kind of like this, but no one can see. So now you can see me swaying silly in the wind. Changing that which seems immovable. The power was still a thing then. To have looked at those you deemed beneath you and raised your big-ass nose, holding it high, heck, if I didn't know any better, I'd think you'd been hiding some heart of gold or the largest family, but for you, happiness is not the wideness or the heart, but gold in pockets, gold on skin, light shining in your eyes, so you put on expensive glasses. To have loved and lost is not your experience. We think of ways to bring you over, but you never accept an invitation you didn't deliver yourself. How does this make sense? Your breath reeks and you guzzle more vodka. The expensive kind. I dreamed you would perish, not violently, but just disappear. But wishes don't always come true. In the mornings, we drink coffee and hope it doesn't shred our stomach. The stuff that comes out of us is only garbage when we've parted with this The stuff that comes out of us is only garbage when we've parted with the sweet bitterness. Somewhere there are people darker than you and happy. We try to fit this through your chemical brain, but it holds stubborn. What a challenge to change that which seems immovable. All those hours spent feeling guilty are better used arguing. The shouts only get louder and louder, but you're still not hearing. And now, the sea starts whooshing, and now the leaves start falling. Where are we? Nowhere you've ever seen. It is only in the absurd you'll find me running. That last time was everything. We jumped up and down and shook every little piece of garbage out of us. The pain throbs, but there's still nothing to do. The only pain we could ever face was the one that had nothing to do with us. She says, just look at it, and we do, blinking often. When we see it flashing back and forth through our quick blink, we almost forget it is not our pain. Thank you. And up next is Helen.
Thanks, Eli. I'm going to read a story that is in my forthcoming collection that Ashley mentioned. The collection's called Personal Attention Roleplay. And this story is called Surface Dive. I've never read it at an event before, so that's kind of fun. I thought I would be able to read the whole story because it's one of my shorter ones within the time allotted, but I can't. It doesn't fit, so that means that you'll have to read my book. Haha. Okay, Surface Dive. Slipping into the clear, pungent water is easy, like it used to be. The tiles are smooth and reliable, a regular grid beneath her feet. The sun beats through the windows, set high near the ceiling, illuminating every corner of the pool. Light squiggles on the water as swimmers in pastel bathing caps churn up and down the lanes. It is not the lake, she reminds herself. Everything in the community center pool is visible, knowable. The water is soft and warm, a gentle turquoise bath. The pace clock keeps time in the corner, its forearms turning like a patient windmill, yellow, red, green, blue, simple as kindergarten. She chooses the fast lane. She's never been tentative, was always the kid nabbing the first spot in line at the high dive, always called first guard when on duty, always bounded into the bone-chilling lake before anyone else when the spring ice broke open. Snapping her goggles into place, she considers the rhythmic back and forth of the other swimmers and launches herself from the wall at the correct interval. Good, she thinks, letting herself glide below the surface before the first pull of the arms, the first whip of the legs. No sign of panic in her chest, no sign of the full body rattling that overtook her after that last swim. The fast lane is moving at a satisfying speed. The swimmer ahead manages a clipped, measured butterfly. There is no crowding at the ends of the lanes. Exhaling a thick stream of bubbles, she welcomes the underwater muffle, punctured by spurts of echoing noise each time she rises to inhale. She delights at the efficiency of her own motions. Her limbs and lungs have locked into rhythm without her having to think about it. Turning at the end of the lane, she glimpses the teen lifeguard, red vest unchanged since her own days on the high throne. Pull, pull, breathe. Pull, pull, breathe. Pull, pull, breathe. As she swam through that other water, the sunset cast a glinting golden path to that bobbing head. Head up front crawl was what you're supposed to do to keep the person in sight. It may look like they are trying to climb an invisible ladder, she'd been told in her National Lifeguarding Service course years before. It may not look the way you think it would. Keep your gaze focused. Don't waste any time. Reading alone on the dock before dinner, she'd glanced up to see someone thrashing in the middle of the bay. She'd screamed for help and launched herself from her deck chair into the lake with the same breath. It could have been just another one of her grandmother's disturbing stories, told in an urgent whisper in the quiet afternoon. Oh, not so quiet. Okay. When the other adults were off drinking cocktails on the dock. A favorite great-uncle drowned during a swim to Lone Pine Point. He was fit, made the distance easily every day of every summer. Until. It was a terrible shock to everyone, Grandma said. No one could recognize his bloated body when it was found. You should never swim in the evening after eating. You should never swim without someone watching you from the dock. And keep an eye out for strangers lurking around the property. It could have been foul play, you never know. Their family had owned the cottage and the land it stood on since the early 20th century. Grandma and the other adults had an irritating suspicion of trespassers, of people from town, or vagabonds infiltrating the woods, stealing swims in the lake. It was a shared attitude among all the cottagers in the area. A kayak paddle would go missing at the Dorians or the McEacherns, and the phone in the kitchen would start ringing frantically, neighbors shouting down the line about padlocks and security cameras and mandatory visitor passes. But she looked forward to cottage time every summer, to the sweet scent of sun-drenched rock and the slow creak of the rowboat and the moody blue-green lake, so easy to disappear into. She searched for signs of the great uncle, who sometimes appeared as a smudged face in a photo full of smudged faces, easy to overlook. Is that him? She remembers asking her father, sitting beside him on the scratchy cottage couch. Is that who? He seemed puzzled, turned the filmy page of the photo album. Turn it back. Great Uncle Edmund. Grandma said that was him in the photo when she came up last year. Her father had looked at her blankly. The one who drowned, I mean. She said that sometimes she could still see him swimming in the lake. But Grandma's memory was notoriously unreliable. Don't scare your sisters, she was told. Don't scare the cousins. No more grandma stories. No more great Uncle Edmund. Kick, kick, evenly, without bending the knees. Kick from the hips. Kick, kick. Don't splash. Don't think about foot cramps. Never think about those. Her head-up front crawl was still strong, even though she hadn't lifeguarded for a couple of years. Hold on, she yelled, face lapped up by waves. Just hold on, I'm coming. Who could the person be? She could make out short gray hair, an open mouth, gaping at water level. An older man, she guessed. He looked somehow familiar. Maybe he was a guest of the second cousins down the lake. A more distant relation? He was further out than she had initially thought. Should have taken one of the boats, she cursed herself. His head was now underwater more often than above. He was splashing less. He wasn't shouting. Drowners were often silent, she'd been told. She propelled herself frantically forward, her thighs burning with effort. In the lane beside hers, a swimmer, sleek as a seal, pushes off the wall, slices down through the water, grazing the distant tiles of the deep end. She watches him from above, skimming her way along the surface. It's as if they're both flying, catching different eddies of air, him below, her above. She could pass directly over him, and he wouldn't know it. Or maybe he'd catch her shadow scudding along the bottom. She can see him so clearly through the water, every brief twitch of muscle along his back, the ripple of his swim trunks as he finally allows himself a frog kick, the stream of bubbles behind him as he rises back up. The movements of the man in the lake were graceless and chaotic, the water choppy and almost opaque. If I can just make it to him, she thought, it'll be fine, we'll be fine. She paused upright, treading water and catching her breath at the spot where he should have been, where she'd seen his head surfacing moments before. She should have been able to locate him, grab him firmly around the waist. A pia carry. She'd done them so many times in drills. Was that the flash of a flailing arm? But when she reached for him, her hands met nothing but each other, clasped and clasped at emptiness. Never think of the lake is the rule while swimming out to the point alone. Never think of the green water and what it hides, of how on an overcast day the green darkens to black, making it impossible to see more than inches below the surface. How your arms become ghostly, pulling and pulling in the lightless void, so that it suddenly seems impossible that your body could float, could propel itself through the cold liquid nothing to the safety of shore. In the pool, her serenity gives way to panic. She forgets which stroke she's been doing, the movements of her muscles suddenly uncoordinated and meaningless. What about air, her brain jolts? What about breathing? She swallows a stinging throatful of water, has to grab the rough rope of the lane marker, coughing and spitting. She gestures the swimmer behind her to pass. The lifeguard looks over, but she signals that she's fine. She launches herself back into the flow of the lane. Freestyle, at least 4 more laps, she orders herself. Easy as walking. In the lake, she swam in circles around the area where she'd seen him last. How could his body have sunk so quickly? She gulped a great lungful of air and plunged down into the unlit depths. Straight down, a vertical dive, scanning for the glow of flesh, feeling for the solidity of limbs, the round knock of a head, a straggle of hair. Part of her was aware that the sun was nearing the horizon, that soon the gold-flecked water would become lightless and inescapable. If I can complete a perfect flip turn at the end of this lap, she thinks, then I'll be safe. Everything will realign. The worst mistake, she knows, is to overcalculate. She commands herself not to think about it, to just let her muscle memory take care of the motions. But already now she's uncertain. She's starting to somersault on the wrong stroke, a touch too far from the wall, so that she has to kick awkwardly as she turns over, has to reach her legs for the end of the lane when they ought to hit the wall in tandem with decisiveness, and here she is, twisting sideways to complete the motion, having to shove herself off the wall with 1 foot, slow and inefficient. There's water in her goggles now, blurring her vision to a chop. She's barely moving back in the opposite direction before she feels the churn of the swimmer behind her, the insistent brush of fingers against her left foot, then her right. She had arrowed downward in one surface dive after another, willing herself through the murk to the lower layers of the lake where the water stayed cold all year, her arms clearing frantic circles before her, her eyes so wide open it felt as though they would spring from her face. Nothing. There was nothing. She had no idea how long she had been out there for. As she swam back towards the dock in the gathering night, shivering with cold and exertion, it was as if her body had forgotten how to stay afloat. She struggled, counting her strokes grimly in her head, tendrils of lakeweeds brushing her feet. Each time they touched her, she recoiled and flailed her legs, twisted to look behind her. Was it him? Was he grabbing at her? Had he floated back to the surface now that she had given up? She wanted it to be him, but her breath caught in jagged gasps, the grasp of fingers against her calves and ankles, churning her into mindless, sinking terror. That's all. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Kama.
It is so exciting. I haven't been, yeah, we're still in the testing phase. I'm glad I have an audience of 6 people because that hasn't happened in so long. It's so long. So this is amazing. Thank you for all the organization that went behind creating this space, creating this event. I'm going to be reading one piece today, and it's actually a piece that just got published in the spring edition of Canadian Theatre Review. And the story behind this piece, actually, this was a piece that I was commissioned to write in French. But I do this thing where whenever I have to write something in French, I always write my first draft in English. And then I translate it in French, and then I rework it in French. And I've been publishing increasingly in French, and now I'm like, what do I do with all those random bits and pieces of unworked English work? And so this one I submitted to Canadian Theatre Review. It's amazing. It's a really exciting issue because it's an issue where Bilal Bag basically curated a series of monologues written specifically by trans women and trans femmes. So this piece is one of the pieces in it. So I'm just going to read that today. So it's called Surviving and Thriving, a song for the child who needs it. Child of color, child of color, child of color, you yes, you who holds affliction in your heart, who carries the rage of breaking oceans in your chest, you with mortar sealed along the folds of your vocal cords, sediment scattered in your throat, you with thundering nights under your eyelids, whose lips quiver in fear each time you try to speak your truths. Child of color, you, yes you, yes you, you. This is wisdom passed down from a grandmama to her granddaughter, who herself became a grandmama and passed this wisdom down to her granddaughter, like the rivers that flowed, sweeps, sap, water, pollen in the lens of our ancestors all the way to the sea. This is law passed down from a grandmama to her granddaughter, who herself became a grandmama and passed this law down to her granddaughter like the tight pain along the length of your arms when your bony fingers massage saffron and mustard oil into the salty flesh of raw mangoes. This is a prayer passed down from kin to kin, through lineages of survivance and magic, the pulse of resilience beating its drum in the heart of your ribcage, sinuous waves lapping against bones under your skin, keeping you and your grandmama alive and her grandmama before her. This is a story passed down that I now pass on to you, so you may learn from it, so you may live by it, so you may pass it on to your grown grandchildren someday when you have them. For yes, you will have them. They will come searching for you, searching for love, searching for history, searching for warm honeyed milk, searching for their foremothers. There is surviving and there is thriving. These are different things, and this you need to know. Surviving is living out of hunger, the constant search for food, for love, for acceptance, for sleep, for scraps of wool to cover your body at night. Surviving is the rumbling hammer in your gut when your body and your spirit fall apart and trudge along muddy tracks miles apart. Surviving is when you and you are no longer in the same room, under the same skin, but somehow you keep breathing. Surviving will not make you whole. Surviving might afford you quick relief, give you the illusion of a full belly for 1 hour, for one night, for one quick fuck, for just another high. But these never last, and soon you'll be hungry again. Thriving is different. Oh child, thriving is something else. Thriving is like watching the sun rise over the horizon, breaking through the night's murmur, bringing truth and light across the shadowed lands. Thriving is like a flower blooming, gentle petals unfurling their vivid heart to the open skies. Thriving is like winged pollen, exhaling good fortune in the winds, spreading songs of resistance and healing from our ancestors, the gospel of maternal soil that refuses to disappear. Thriving is that feeling when your heart expands and your spirit soars, and you know in the safety of your bones you can walk in your light, you can stand in your truth, you can live, you can love your life's purpose. There is surviving and there is thriving. These are different things, and this you need to know. This I also needed to know, which is why it is wisdom that my grandmama passed on to me, to you. Don't get me wrong. Survival skills are important. They allow you to do just that, to survive. Your survival skills will make you smash your fist against your father's jaw, steal your mother's lipstick and her cash, pack your bag, run from this abusive home that you loved and hated so much. Your survival skills will make you run away from this country that wants you dead, turn you into a skillful liar, a talented thief, an expert manipulator. They'll teach you to fight, to freeze, because that will be the only way to protect your heart, to survive. But surviving is not thriving. At a point of time, you need to hold each of your survival skills to the light, every single one of them, like ferns rising from the earth looking into the sun. Hold them up, measure them, weigh them, watch the thickness of their veins, the depth of their roots, pay attention to the stories they tell you about who you were, who you are, and who you want to become. Do this exercise with diligence, truthfulness, and honesty. And if you find out that a skill is a fenced armor around your heart, if you find out that a skill is a wall between you and others, if you find out that a skill mounts a barrier between you and you, then that skill does not serve you anymore. So thank it, honor it, grieve it, and let it go. And dream up new ways to grieve your life's journey. This life is grief. Your growth and transformation require grieving. Dream up new ways to celebrate your life's journey, because this life is also joy, deep, thick, expansive, abundant joy. Ground yourself in reimagined values that honor the child who sings in you. Learn to listen when your body speaks, because your body knows, your body speaks. Fortify the sacred languages of your flesh. Excavate every single word that lies buried under your skin. Speak your truths. Speak your truths. Speak your truths. Speak your truths. Develop daily rituals that connect you to the miracle of your heartbeat, the divine purpose in each of your breaths. Manifest the stories that you dream of, visions of your soul. Live and actualize the full extent of your life's purpose. Develop, nurture, and refine your life's work with the diligence of your ancestors who relentlessly worked the lands of destiny, seeding your legacy into the soil of the future. And uncover new vocabularies for love, for you, for others, for love, for you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Callum Angus. I'm so sorry I can't be there in person or in virtual synchronous personhood today, but I'm really happy to be able to be invited to read alongside all of my other metonymy author brethren, Eli, Helen, and Kama. I wish I could hear you all read in person. One day it'll happen. For now, I'm going to read my story, Moon Snail, from my book, A Natural History of Transition, which is out now with Metonymy. This story begins with a brief epigraph from Gertrude Stein. Science is continuously busy with the complete description of something, with ultimately the complete description of anything, with ultimately the complete description of everything. Getting out of the boat was transom. She perched and swung there, balanced on a wave, while her classmates watched which way the hinge would swing, up in the air, light as a tern, or down to the sea. A fracturing of light and cold and wet held close to the skin by petticoats, a breaking of camaraderie as the men tried not to laugh, tried to hoist her from the shallow divot in the rocks where she sometimes might have liked to stay, among the anemone, mussels, and crabs, filled and emptied twice a day at the moon's insistence, like her hopes for what she'd see in the viewfinder. Microscopic streamers, embryos smothered under glass, or just a lot of cloudy nothing, which only looked like nothing until a twist of knob crystallized all the unnamed swimmery spinners that occupy a vacant space. Inside the lab is where things unbend and show off. At first, she thought she knew the story of birth. Now she realizes how much more there is than blood and cry and doubling. There's the whole before and after the bee leaps into being, the quiet, energetic egg, translucent limbs in flux, fluttering ghosts of gestures they'll perform on land. In this place where they are at the start of taking the start so seriously, she hadn't expected to be telling a new story each day about life and death, sense and understanding. She wanted to slow down and think more about keratin, limestone, calcium, break it all down piece by piece like a moon snail drilling a hole in the shell of a smaller snail and flooding it with caustic juices before slurping it all out. She would like to do that to the world around her, liquefy until it bleeds together. She walks the path of the Nautilus, exploring its shell through winding streets to the boarding house, always stopping off at the beach. She marvels at the shell, the 3x3x3 of it, the perfectly stacked whorls, one on top of the other like china plates on a sideboard. She wants to be inside of its geometry, part of its perfect equation. She can't get inside the embryo sandwiched between strips of glass, but maybe if she thinks hard enough, she can shrink her thoughts to fit, concentrate them like little cubes of bouillon, condensed so more potent. She would keep them that way all the time, to have something sharp about her, even when she leaves the shell, something to resist digestion. Morning, creak of boarders, women all around her, most waiting for beloveds out at sea or visiting their scientist fiancés. Lying in bed, she waits till they've all left. She does not enjoy small talk about husbands' grand discoveries, which are nothing more than routine experiments made gigantic by man talk. Men magnified everything. Certain women ate it up. She rises, puts up her hair and dresses, smiles to find a breakfast warm and wrapped for her by the landlady, whom she rarely seesaw, but they understand one another. Salt did that to a woman, she thinks. It's doing it to me. She looked forward to being slowly desiccated by the sea. Take me down to salt cod, she thinks. Make me a thin crust of mineral on the rocks, tenacious, bitter, but necessary for life. She found herself using the lab's way of looking on other things. Light, silverware, the drape of a dress, fallen down barns. A poet makes science out of everything the scientist ignores. She tried opening her viewfinder wider, found she could make a study of the folds of fabric in a skirt, the slatted fences, the slots left open, the kettle's curves. She grasped the space between the words of fisherman's speech, the rocking boats, how frightening the amount she could miss. Once in a while, she'd be waiting her turn at the nets or on the beach alone, and everything would stick, slow down to freezing, and then come unglued. So easy to separate things from what made them, from what made them separate, from what made separate thingness desirable. All could be strung along the necklace of thingness, an abacus of those and thises. These were not thoughts she shared then. She wrote reports, dry language about what fit inside the microscope's dark circle. And it was a relief to set it all down in distinctly labeled sections. To ignore the voice inside that said, "But you forgot the flickering of the oil lamps when you stayed late. You forgot eyes burning. You forgot." Did her feelings not influence the development of the cold beating heart on glass? Were they insulated from her caring? Wasn't it listening to the phonograph like she was? Would it quicken when her heart quickened? Day after day, pipetting their little bodies onto slides, keeping them moist to remember. She felt responsible for them, slotting them back in their wooden boxes like cribs, describing every part of them like kin, the ones she liked. The man at dinner spoke casually of moving rivers, of dikes and channeling, the flood and rush of it. He laughed when she said she'd like to try to move one too, said she'd be better off with her fish eggs, let men of industry worry about which way the rivers go. The other women took little notice of what she said anymore. But she would see many such rivers forking this way and pooling that, falling where the dynamite blasted, drying up where men drained them, running turbid with the surge of men until she found a final bank on which to rest that hadn't moved since she'd said stay. But for now, the water haunted her. It all seemed to belong to men. Men on the shore, in the boats, fishing off the banks, men waiting for the catch on docks covering the loosened boards with spit. She despised and admired them, wanted to be one of them, or among them free of her separateness, wanted to liquefy them too. One day, she and the other women who spent their time looking through microscopes and writing down what they saw, all in a boat together. She didn't know them well, knew the men better, but then it was nice for a few minutes just to sit among them, remarking to the quiet oarsman on the shape of the waves and the cormorant's stance, and not have it met with boasts of swimming unmanageable distances. He smiled, rowed, agreed with a sharp intake of air. They spoke of the landing site, a pocket beach remote and wheeling with seabirds, where they would spend the afternoon collecting specimens, putting thin white wrists into bone-ache water, pulling out slime and cold junk of life. She felt a bit whole for a sliver of time. They came round the point to where they could see the men grinning, each with a boutonniere in his lapel. There were blankets, one for each woman, roses and vases sunk in sand, champagne uncorked and cooling in a tide pool. The men carried them through the shallows so they would not wet their skirts. Gertrude waved them off, got wet, got salty, got to the shore and was chagrined at how eager the women in the boat were for chivalry on a deserted island. Nets lay abandoned to the side, all collection forfeit to restore this shameful order. If she hadn't thought of herself much before as Gertrude, but more as she, now she knew she wasn't she, but Gertrude, something made separate not by the peculiarities of herself, but by the other's separateness from her, their strange habits. She was more like the lonesome embryo than them, the sharp stab of sunlight through the shallows to slaty gray pebbles than them. And the pity was that the roses were pretty, but she couldn't enjoy them because she was more like the moon snail than them. That's the end. Thank you so much. Again, wish I could be there. Thank you for listening and all my love.